Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB Pro and best-selling author of Align Your Empire. Today's guest is Burton Hughes. Burton, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. And Quentin, you reached out to me, I don't know, a month and a half ago. And I really been looking forward to this one because my passions are like health and wellness, bodybuilding, business. So it looks like we're going to talk about both of those. And this is that rare opportunity where I'm able to talk about probably my two favorite things in the world. So thank you.
Very cool, Burton. I'm super excited to have you on too, man, because we're definitely going to get into the business side, the entrepreneurship side of things, which I think is going to add a lot of value to the listeners. So a couple of questions I'd like to start each conversation, each podcast off with. The first one, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
So really funny story. Jay Cutler is probably my favorite bodybuilder of all time. The reason that's funny to me is almost every day someone's like, you know who you look like? You look like Jay Cutler and all this kind of funny stuff. And through the mid 2000s, when I really started getting into bodybuilding, I always obviously he was up there with Ronnie and stuff like that. But I felt like in a weird way with the kind of likeness of him, it was kind of like, man, I could look like that, and I really like that. And he's also, huge with business, but really that's how it all kind of started. I was like, man, he could be like my big brother, And then I always liked the look of Frank Zane. See, he was always kind of on the smaller side. So Frank Zane, I think he won the Olympia like 187, 185. And that's when I compete, I'm around 185, 187 on stage. Right now I'm walking around like 178. But I always liked that because he had like the great symmetry and lines. And Jay Cutler is like, I kind of look like him. And then it's funny how we'll talk about it later, but like I got a pretty close relationship with him now because of that. So it's kind of a funny story, but those are my two main guys.
Very cool. And kind of the funny thing about that with Jay Cutler is that's actually how I came across you is because Jay Cutler is one of the guys I'm always checking out his stuff on Instagram. And he had reposted something in terms of your book. And I was like, okay, who's this Burton guy that has this book that Jay Cutler is posting something on his Instagram stories about? So that kind of brings us full circle. That's how I found out about you and
Cool.
Reached out to you. So and I'm Jay Cutler's my all-time favorite bodybuilder as well. Just love the athlete and the champion in terms of competition bodybuilding, but then the business side is something that I think most of us respect. So super cool on that. Now, at what age, Burton, did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
Man, you got great questions. So I have 4 older brothers, all into sports. So, I'm like a late bloomer. I'm 39, I'll be 40, but everyone's like, man, you look like 25, 26, and that's a good thing, right? But when you're young, I look really young. So I was always fast. I always hit hard. I had the tenacity, but I was always on the smaller end. And it kind of put a chip on my shoulder. And then when I started going into like high school and stuff like that, I always had like the swimmer's body. Like one thing, like I'm not gifted with like a mesomorph, like huge body, but like body for body. Like I can put on muscle, but I'm an ectomorph, right? Let's just be real with it. So it was one of those things to where I've always respected the discipline. I was a hard gainer, but man, my food was always right. Even, 12, 13, like I was super into my nutrition. I knew what it was going to be. And then as I started getting older, I started getting some success in business. But one thing you can't buy is you can't buy confidence. It doesn't matter how much money you make, you can't buy confidence. So I talk about that a lot. So it would have been around 2008, 9. I started getting that, like, I'd like to put on some muscle. It's not too late. I'm making a little bit of money. I can get a trainer. I can get a dietitian because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do this on my own. So I consulted with a trainer and a dietitian, and they said, like, these are the things you need to do. And that was it. So can't buy confidence. I thought that, getting the physical stature would definitely help, and it did. But a lot of people had a lot of things to say about it because they were like, you don't have the size for it. There's always the haters and always the people that you want to tell you don't have the bone structure for it or this and that. So
Excellent. So I like to use that question, Burton, to kind of transition into talking about my guest's childhood, their upbringing a little bit.
Mhm.
That's really important to me, just to kind of hence get behind the muscle. So talk about a little bit. You already mentioned you had four older brothers, but talk about your family a little bit. Talk about where you grew up. Talk about, you know, sports, any activities that you were involved with up to about high school. And then once we get to high school, we'll move on from there.
Okay. I'm going to end this little section with a cool story that happened that'll kind of, again, kind of tie some things together. So yeah, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Parents, I think, were really divorced by the time I was 1. It's probably better that way. I don't know how they came to be, but like, I think, you know, sometimes people are better apart. I grew up no silver spoon by any means. My mom, you know, I talk about it. God love her. She's great, you know, good woman, probably some bad decisions, but my mom's been married 11 times. So there was a lot of chaos, kind of commotion, and grew up in a single wide trailer in Columbus, Ohio. Like when I was young, I mean, like I said, there's just no silver spoon by any means. And we ended up moving to the city. My mom was working at a company called Mid City Electric. I think she's making $7 an hour. And I knew that she, you know, wanted to become a true homeowner. And we always had nice things. Like she kept everything nice, but I mean, we lived in a single wide trailer. Let's be honest. Like it's not cool. We were so poor that I had no idea that we were poor. They did a really good job with, you know, kind of insulating. And I just figured we were just like a normal family trying to get by, you know, when the electricity and stuff like that would get cut off, you know, it would be, and it would be like we're going to make a fort, you know, we're camping inside, you know, things like that I think the parents would do to try to protect the situation. And I really respect them for it. I remember when I was, I think, 2nd or 3rd grade, I started, you know, kind of realized some things didn't add up. I remember my babysitter at the time would smoke crack in the kitchen with us because there was a weird pungent smell. So at a very young age, I was around drugs. I was around a lot of violence, a lot of alcohol. So at a young age, I realized those things weren't for me. You know, it's one of those things that even to this day, I don't drink a drop of alcohol because it's not for me. It's not what I'm about. But other people can do what they want. So I learned, you know, how I didn't want to be, right. And then I would see my father, you know, every other weekend. He's a good dad, you know, was big into sports, you know, so, you know, took me to football practice and I wanted to be like my older brother. So, you know, it was one thing that my dad and I don't have a lot in common, but sports was kind of the thing that, you know, we can relate to each other about. I know he really wanted me to like baseball. I just never got into baseball. I just never liked it. I could field and catch, but I never liked hitting, but I did it to appease him. But then once, you know, middle school, high school rolled around to football for me, I was fast. I was hungry. I would hit hard as hell because I knew being small, like I said, a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, having 4 older brothers, they whooped my ass. You know, I was tough and I could take some pent out aggression. You know, I was dealing with some things. I had a lot of anxiety. I was prescribed the Acifex because I had ulcers. By the time I was 4th or 5th grade, I had literally chronic ulcers in my stomach and my intestine from worry and stress. You know, so my release was football. My release was I could just absolutely annihilate on the football field. That was my release, you know, and that's kind of where I started. And I knew like I was doing push-ups and I was doing sit-ups. I was the fastest. I was stretching. I was getting after it. Nutrition wasn't a big thing yet. I still hadn't got my mind wrapped around it. But again, that's, you know, like that tenacity to win. And my little league football teams, I mean, we would beat teams 50-0. So I was always on winning programs. I knew the importance of winning. I never missed practice. I never made, you know, I was all in. I wanted to win. I don't know if I wanted to win or I hated losing. I don't know which, you know, I don't know if I hate losing more than I like to win, you know, think about that. And that's something that is just kind of an innate characteristic. So kind of going into high school, I had a brother that was killed in a drug deal, unfortunately. You might have heard about that through some other stuff that I've been on, but I had a brother that was killed in a drug deal gone wrong. And at that point, I was living with my mom and she was like, I think you need, you know, it's time to go move with your dad. Well, my dad lived kind of in a questionable part of town. So I ended up having to go to Columbus City schools. It was kind of rough and tough. And really every day was kind of a fight. But Columbus, Ohio in general is a pretty fit city. We have the Arnold Classic there. You know, we have Westside Barbell. And I remember when Westside Barbell was right down the street from my house, I didn't realize these guys pulling these big sleds and stuff in this literally Westside Barbell was in this strip mall, not even a strip mall. I'm talking a convenience mart, and next to it was like an abandoned, like next to it, that was literally Westside Barbell. I'm telling you, it was called JJ's, but they called it Haji's. And it was like this run. I mean, it was not good. That's where the iconic Westside Barbell was in this freaking convenience store. And it was so funny, but these guys were massive pulling these sleds. And I'm like, I'm about that. I like that. So that kind of takes me into kind of high school. So you said you wanted to push Paul. So I did. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. So, talk to me about, your outlet when you were younger. Was sports your outlet? Did you kind of find another outlet, maybe in video games or something else? Where did you kind of go to hide or to find cover in terms of all the chaos that was around you at home?
Sports definitely, for sure, football. And then this is another thing. I would think I was the mailman's kid, except I looked exactly like my dad. And I really liked motocross and racing and BMX, anything that would go fast. I mean, motorcycles, race cars. I mean, I just like to go fast. And when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I remember I had like a big wheel, right? And then my parents got me a bike, but then it had training wheels on it. And I remember I was like, I want these training wheels off it. That day I was at my first sanctioned BMX event. I mean, just I was like, take them off. And next thing I know, we're at the BMX track, I'm racing, right? That doesn't happen. That was literally just me being like, I don't want these freaking training wheels on my bike. Let's go. Next thing you know, I'm racing. And the thing is like, I really liked it. I like racing. I like sales. I like entrepreneurship, because when you win, there's no gray area. When you're racing, there's no like, well, it's politics and well, they like it. There's none of that. You either win or you lose. You either make it money or you don't. You either grow your business or you don't, period. I like that. So I'm sure a therapist could unpack that and be like, well, you isolate yourself, you're a junkyard dog, whatever. But all I want to say is like, my biggest thing is like with the BMX, I could be by myself. I love the team sports, but I loved being able to stand out, be myself, and prove myself. So I really got into BMX. I had some broken bones, and the thing is, I loved it. And still to this day in my DNA, like I love cars, I love motorcycles, I love racing. It's an innate characteristic. It's literally in my blood, and no one else in my family's like it. So it's really funny how that came to be. So that was definitely a release. And I like that because I could go off and be by myself. I call myself like an omnivert. I don't know if that's official, but I can speak at events. I can go to events, but with our contracting jobs that we do, like I'm in my truck by myself a lot. So it gives me a lot of time to reflect, be by myself, but then I can be around a bunch of people, but then I like to come back and be by myself. So omnivert, I can pivot both ways, but if someone would ask me like to be a loner, no problem. I could do it for sure. And a lot of these sports with bodybuilding, it's very singular. So I think that's what's always been kind of drawn to me, with it. So, yeah.
So before we kind of transition from those younger years, I do want to ask you, Burton, as growing up, and you talked about the kind of the chaos and the home environment, was there an adult, a teacher, a coach, maybe an older family member that did maybe speak some life into you or have a positive impact in your life, or not necessarily in those younger years?
It really came into high school, and it was really one of these weird things. So a lot of people probably don't know this. I'm going to just come out and say it. My father's was in bands, and his grandfather, so I grew up singing. So I've been in a few like different vocal groups. I always kind of keep that in my back pocket. Music's another big part of my life. And I remember in high school, like I said, I grew up in Columbus, and I went to Columbus West High School, and it wasn't in a great part of town, but there was the vocal music department at that high school was exceptional. And really it was because the teacher was exceptional. And it was like an oasis. And at first I didn't want to do it because I didn't want people to make fun of me, because like vocal music and stuff like that in high school, like, dude, you're a dork, you're a nerd, like whatever. So I really fought that. And the teacher, his name's Phil Wallace. I reached out to him not too long ago, but he was an oasis. So he was the teacher that really kind of put his arm around me and was like, you're special, man, you're different. And I ended up joining the golf team and doing all this kind of stuff, but he really poured into me. And the biggest thing that he did for me that really changed me, and he would get really frustrated with me because I was a smart, good kid that would make dumb decisions. So he would be like, you are the dumbest, smartest person I know. You need to figure it out. And then like, it was out of love, but he really kind of kept it straight. And he wrote on the back of one of his business cards, he said, you have to be responsible. And he like underlined it twice. And I kept that in my wallet until it literally turned to dust. And he doesn't know it or not, but my book that I just wrote, I just sent him a hardcover copy of it. And I wrote, you have to be responsible. If being responsible, basically the book, it was kind of full circle. It was really cool with that. But I really feel like he was the first person that kind of taught, like, you can be different. You can step out. You can do things differently. I mean, in his mid-20s, he built an orphanage in India. This guy was doing really cool things. He was only a school teacher. I think he's a multimillionaire. I don't know for sure, but he's a school teacher because he knows kids he giving back. Like, it's not about the money. Like, he was a very successful dude, lived meager, but he just poured over and just loved kids. And he was a good dude. And I'm really thankful that I was able to have a teacher like that. You hear people that have it, but unfortunately you don't, you hear about kids slipping through the cracks because maybe they didn't have that one person speak over them and speak life into them. And he very much did that for me. And I would say that I really thank him for that. And I physically called him, a few months back, and it was a really nice conversation. And he's like, I really always knew you were going to be great. You just needed to get out of your own way. And I started crying. So that's how that went.
I love that, man. That's some powerful stuff. So talk to me about, as you were getting ready to graduate from high school, you're in those teen years. Did you have some aspirations in terms of maybe wanting to, be a professional athlete, like a football player, or, doing the motocross? What were you thinking about when you were done with high school that you want to do when you quote unquote grew up? And then once you graduate high school, where did life take you?
Yeah. So I was I was unconventional. That's what I can tell you. I always knew like college really wasn't for me. I had a lot of anxiety because I remember my senior year, people were like, oh, I'm submitting stuff to college. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go that route. I don't know. I didn't know what I wanted to be. Everyone just said, like, go to school, get a job, the whole thing. But in my family, like, my uncles and my brothers, they all kind of entrepreneurs. My brother had a mortgage company. My uncle Brian had a commercial cleaning company. And I thought it was kind of funny. I was like, man, you guys clean toilets and stuff like that. But then I didn't realize that, like, there's some serious money in commercial cleaning. So like, I was still like trying to be cool, right? I was like, that's not cool. But like, being cool doesn't get you paid. And they were making a lot of money with the commercial cleaning thing. So I started learning at a young age. It's not the title. Do you want to be a CEO of like your own like dumb thing, or do you want to make money? Because people are like, I'm a CEO, I'm this and that. Like, who cares? Like, what's your bank account? Like, that's what I want to know. Like, CEO of what? So I think a lot of times people are caught up in the title, but they don't really think about the work and to build something. So I knew I had a lot of anxiety because school didn't feel right. I literally, I think, like I said, being singular and always kind of being by myself and relishing that, like, and even my grade cards were socializes too much, does not respect authority, does not listen to well, does not take, I mean, my report cards are like kindergarten, first, second, they were red, brother. Like, I mean, red from like marks all over. I was a good kid, but like defiant towards authority. Like, if there was an entrepreneur, like, man, that was a recipe. I was it. I mean, it was written in the book. So like school, like doing reports, like it's just against my DNA. I think I went 2 quarters and like hated it, flunked out. But then I started realizing that I needed to start making some money. So I started getting into real estate. I started working for, builders and stuff like that. And I started accumulating some wealth at, some very young ages. One of the biggest things is I always rolled with older people. So a lot of my immediate friends were at least 8, 10, 12 years older than me because my brothers were so much older than me. I just was wise beyond my years and I was always reaching up. So I worked for a company. I was 14 years younger than anyone else at the company. It took me 6 weeks to get employed there. But then next thing you know, I was making good money. At 21 years old, I was around 150. I was around 100, 150 grand a year is what I started making when I got into about 21. And then I was sleeping on my mom's couch. I had 2 rental houses. And then when I was 23, I built my first house, 5,200 square foot house in the suburbs of Columbus. And everyone around me was like, you're a drug dealer, you're this, you're that, they're looking at me trying to figure me out, but I was always different. My parents didn't even really know what to say to me because I was doing more than them. So I was always different. And unfortunately, different scares people. And that's when I started learning that sometimes your family doesn't want to see you win, unfortunately. And when you're doing big things, I always kind of kept my mouth shut. I never like was, boastful or anything like that's not my style. But then that's when I realized that the crabs in the bucket, may start pulling you down, because when you step out again, it makes people uncomfortable. And I remember hearing like, "Oh, you're going too fast, baby. Like, you got to slow down. You got to," they think they're telling you out of love, but really what they're doing is they're throwing water on your fire. So you got to watch that. And unfortunately, I started believing it and thought I was moving too fast and I was reckless. I wasn't. I was just different, going my own pace, which was exceptionally faster, quicker, very directed, because it's just my genetic makeup. And I was reading books and I just was after it because I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want my kids to grow up in a trailer park. I didn't want my kids to be around drugs and violence and things like that, So like, I was driven from a different place. I was driven from like, I want better. I'm not going back every day. Even to this day, I wake up and feel like my back is against the wall. So like, I gotta perform. It's not a scarcity mindset. It's like, I'm not going back. I want to be my best. I want to do my best. And that's ultimately why I wrote the book, is because people are like, you're doing so much, but like, I don't feel strung out. I don't feel busy. I don't have anxiety anymore because I know my mission is clear. I know exactly what I want and I'm going after it daily. And I didn't learn that until I really got into my 20s and really just started going my own way. And the unconventional way was not going to school. So I think I'm a perfect blend of, I call it like this. So people, if you're listening to this, write this down. So you got book smart, you got street smart. You hear that all the time, but add 2 more things to that. You got common sense. But what I have, and I think a lot of you people are listening to, you have uncommon sense. And I think a blend of all 4 of those is amazing, because street smarts are only going to get you so far. You need to start reading books so then you can polish what you're doing. But the uncommon sense is the risk taker, to be able to see risk and be able to calculate and mitigate risk, because you're able to take chances because you know at the end of the day, you can bet on yourself and you're going to win. That's the uncommon sense. You hear common sense, but the uncommon sense is you being able to take risk, mitigate risk, and know that at the end of the day, when it comes back on you, you're able to put that vest on or whatever it may be, like your armor or whatever it is, and go after it, because you know damn well you're driven from a different source, God, whatever you want to call it. You're driven from a different purpose, and other people around you are not going to be able to see that, and it's going to be different. It's going to scare people, and that's kind of rambled there, but that's really how I operate, brother.
Excellent. So the anxiety, I want to talk about that for a minute. That's something you brought up kind of early in your conversation. You said you had the ulcers when you were very young. Is anxiety still something to this day that you struggle with? And if not, then what do you think or what do you know has kind of given you that reprieve from the anxiety?
Anxiety to me was when you're a young kid, like think about it like this. When you're an adult, you really get to choose who you want to be around. Like, let's just be honest. Like, if you're somewhere and you don't feel comfortable, you can roll out. But when you're a kid, guess what? Sit down, be quiet. Like, you're stuck. So a lot of things are out of your control. So I feel like for me, if I'm not in control, I'm not saying like control freak, but if I'm like at a place,
My TV lucky. Hey, turn the TV back on. Turn the TV back on.
Hang on, baby. I gotta go grab Jeez.
Hey, I like a doll. I like a doll.
Stop telling me what to do. I don't like that. Please. Let me grab your shoes.